In the annals of history and the pages of the Bible, there are numerous accounts of individuals who dared to mock or oppose God, only to face swift and severe consequences for their actions. From rebellious sons to arrogant kings, their stories serve as powerful reminders of the repercussions of defying the Almighty. Here are 10 figures whose bold acts of rebellion led to their dramatic and often gruesome ends by divine intervention. Number 1 is King Ahab. King Ahab of Israel was known for his wickedness and idol worship, particularly his devotion to the pagan god Baal. Ahab's marriage to Jezebel, a foreign queen who promoted idolatry and persecuted prophets of the true God, only contributed to his descent into sin. Together, Ahab and Jezebel led Israel astray, leading the nation into a state of spiritual decay and moral corruption. One of the most notorious acts of Ahab occurs in 1 Kings chapter 21, which was the incident with Naboth's vineyard, where Ahab desired the vineyard for himself, but Naboth refused to sell it as it was his ancestral inheritance. Ahab's covetousness and lack of regard for God's commandments led to him allowing Jezebel to orchestrate Naboth's death by stoning through false accusations and manipulation, leading to Ahab taking possession of the vineyard. This act of greed and injustice provoked the wrath of God and led to a severe judgment against Ahab and his household. Elijah was a prophet who initially confronted Ahab regarding his wickedness and the consequences that would result from it. Elijah pronounced judgment on Ahab for his role in the murder of Naboth and the unjust acquisition of his vineyard. Elijah prophesied that dogs would lick up Ahab's blood in the same place where they had licked up Naboth's blood, indicating a violent and ignoble death for the king. Ahab initially repented of his sin, and God withheld his judgment upon him. Despite his brief repentance, Ahab ultimately returned to his sinful and evil life, continuing in his idolatry and defiance of God. Ahab's decision to return to his wicked ways and to disregard later warnings from the prophet Micaiah ultimately culminated in his death in battle, fulfilling the prophecy of his demise. In a battle against the Syrians, Ahab was struck by an arrow between the joints of his armor, leading to his death. His chariot was washed at the pool in Samaria, where Naboth's blood had been shed, and dogs licked up Ahab's blood, just as Elijah had foretold, demonstrating the divine judgment and justice for Ahab's sins and the consequences of his actions. After Ahab's death, his son Ahaziah succeeded him as king of Israel. Ahaziah continued in the evil ways of his father, worshipping idols and provoking the anger of the Lord. In his brief reign, Ahaziah faced consequences for his wickedness as well. Ahaziah's reign was marred by tragedy when he fell through a lattice in his upper chamber and became seriously ill. Instead of seeking the counsel of the Lord, Ahaziah turned to the pagan god Baal-zebub for guidance. This angered the Lord even further, leading to a pronouncement of judgment on Ahaziah for his actions. The prophet Elijah intervened once again, delivering a message from God to Ahaziah that he would not recover from his illness and would die as a consequence of his idolatry. True to the prophecy, Ahaziah died without heirs, further sealing the fate of Ahab's cursed lineage. After Ahaziah's death, his brother Jehoram became king of Israel. Like his father and brother, Jehoram continued the pattern of evil and idol worship. He even married Athaliah, a daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, further connecting the line of Ahab to the throne of Israel. Jehoram's reign was also marked by tragedy and judgment from God. He faced military defeats and was afflicted with a painful disease that led to his slow and agonizing death. Jehoram's eventual demise marked the end of Ahab's descendants ruling over Israel, as the entire lineage was wiped out due to their persistent wickedness and defiance of God. Number 2 is Jezebel. As we have seen, Queen Jezebel, Ahab's wife, was a notorious figure who promoted the worship of false gods and persecuted the prophets of the Lord. After Ahab's death, her own downfall was prophesied by Elijah in 1 Kings 21:17-23. Elijah prophesied that dogs would devour her body as punishment for her wickedness. This prophecy was fulfilled when Jezebel was thrown out of a window by her own eunuchs and left to be eaten by dogs, just as Elijah had foretold, marking a gruesome end for her relentless opposition to God's will. Number 3. Herod the Great. Herod the Great, the ruler of Judea during Jesus' birth, is remembered for his cruelty and paranoia. His order to massacre innocent children in Bethlehem in an attempt to kill the infant Jesus stands as one of his most heinous acts. Herod's reign was also marked by political intrigue, betrayal, and the execution of perceived enemies, including members of his own family. He was known for his brutal suppression of dissent and his willingness to use violence and intimidation to maintain control over his kingdom. Ultimately, Herod the Great met his demise as a result of his sins against God. According to historical accounts, Herod died a painful and gruesome death, suffering from a chronic illness that caused him immense physical suffering in his final days. This was seen by many as a fitting punishment for his wicked deeds and his defiance of God's laws. Number 4 is Herod Antipas. Herod Antipas was a son of Herod the Great and a ruler of Galilee and Perea. He is best known for his role in the trial and execution of John the Baptist, as recounted in the New Testament. Herod Antipas was a deeply flawed and morally corrupt leader who engaged in various evil deeds during his rule. One of the most infamous acts of Herod Antipas was his incestuous marriage to Herodias, the wife of his half-brother Philip. This unlawful union was denounced by John the Baptist, who publicly criticized Herod Antipas for his immoral behavior. In retaliation, Herod Antipas had John the Baptist arrested and eventually executed to please Herodias and her daughter Salome, who had demanded his death. Herod Antipas was also involved in the trial of Jesus before his crucifixion. According to the Gospel accounts, Herod Antipas questioned Jesus, but ultimately found no guilt in him. However, he allowed the crowd to demand Jesus' crucifixion, thus participating in the unjust execution of an innocent man. According to the historian Josephus, Herod Antipas was exiled by the Roman Emperor Caligula to Gaul, where he lived out the rest of his days in obscurity and shame. This exile was seen as a fitting punishment for his wicked deeds and his defiance of God's laws. Number 5, Goliath. Goliath was a giant Philistine warrior who was famously known for his challenge to the Israelites and his defeat by a young shepherd named David. Goliath's evil deeds were primarily manifested through his arrogance, defiance of God, and his taunts against the Israelites. One of Goliath's most notable evil deeds was his mockery and contempt for the God of Israel. He openly challenged the Israelites to send a champion to fight against him, boasting of his own strength and belittling the power of the Israelite God. Goliath's arrogance and blasphemy were a direct affront to God and his chosen people. Goliath's immense size and strength made him a formidable opponent, and his taunts struck fear into the hearts of the Israelite army. However, David, armed with nothing but a sling and stones, faced Goliath with faith and courage, trusting in God to deliver him from his enemy. In the end, Goliath met his demise at the hands of David, who struck him down with a stone to the forehead, killing him instantly. This victory was not only a physical defeat for Goliath, but also a triumph of faith over fear and a demonstration of the power and faithfulness of God. The defeat of Goliath serves as a powerful example of how God can bring down the proud and arrogant and deliver the oppressed and faithful. Goliath's ultimate demise from his sins against God serves as a reminder of the consequences of defying and mocking the Almighty, as well as the victory that comes from trusting in God's strength and righteousness. Number 6, Judas Iscariot. Judas Iscariot is one of the most infamous figures in Christian history, known for his betrayal of Jesus Christ, which led to his crucifixion. Judas's evil deeds were characterized by greed, deceit, and ultimately betrayal of his close friend and teacher, Jesus. One of the most well-known evil deeds of Judas Iscariot is his decision to betray Jesus to the religious leaders for 30 pieces of silver. This act of betrayal was a betrayal of trust, friendship, and loyalty, as well as a defiance of God's will and the teachings of Jesus. Judas's actions led to the arrest, trial, and crucifixion of Jesus, ultimately leading to his death. After betraying Jesus, Judas Iscariot realized the gravity of his actions and attempted to repent by returning the 30 pieces of silver to the religious leaders. However, overcome with guilt and shame, Judas ultimately took his own life by hanging himself. Judas's tragic demise serves as a powerful reminder of the destructive consequences of sin, betrayal, and lack of faith. There are differing interpretations among scholars and theologians regarding whether Judas Iscariot fulfilled any specific prophecies by his death. Some believe that his betrayal of Jesus and subsequent death by suicide were prophesied, while others argue that Judas's actions were his own choice and not predestined. One commonly cited prophecy that some believe was fulfilled by Judas is found in the Old Testament book of Psalms, specifically Psalm 41:9, which reads, "Even my close friend, someone I trusted, one who shared my bread, has turned against me." This verse is often seen as foreshadowing Judas's betrayal of Jesus. Additionally, some point to prophecies in the Old Testament that speak of a betrayer or one who will hand over the innocent, such as in Zechariah 11:12-13 and Isaiah 53:3-7. Ultimately, whether Judas Iscariot's actions were prophesied or not is a matter of interpretation and belief, and opinions on this issue can vary among Christians and scholars. Judas's betrayal of Jesus and his subsequent death are seen as a cautionary tale of the consequences of choosing worldly gain over righteousness. Number 7. Queen Athaliah. Queen Athaliah was a prominent figure in the biblical account found in the books of Kings and Chronicles. She was the daughter of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel of Israel, known for their idolatry and wickedness. Athaliah married King Jehoram of Judah and became Queen of Judah. Athaliah's reign was marked by tyranny, violence, and idolatry. After her son King Ahaziah died, she saw an opportunity to seize power and become queen herself. In an act of great wickedness, Athaliah ordered the execution of all the royal heirs to secure her position on the throne. However, despite her evil deeds, Athaliah's reign was cut short by divine intervention. Joash, one of the infant royal heirs who had been hidden and saved from her massacre, was crowned king by the high priest Jehoiada at the age of 7. With the support of the priests and the people, Joash led a revolt against Athaliah, culminating in her overthrow and death by execution. Athaliah's downfall and death were seen as a divine judgment from God against her for her idolatry, violence, and usurpation of the throne. Her reign of terror came to an end, and the rightful heir was restored to power. Number 8 is Haman. Haman is a figure from the Old Testament book of Esther, who is portrayed as a villain and an enemy of the Jewish people. He is depicted as an official in the Persian court who hatches a plot to annihilate all Jews in the kingdom. Haman's evil intentions are influenced by his pride, arrogance, and deep-seated hatred for Mordecai, a Jewish servant who refuses to bow down to him. In the story, Haman convinces King Xerxes to issue a decree allowing for the extermination of the Jewish people. However, Queen Esther, who is Jewish herself, reveals Haman's plot to the king and pleads for her people's safety. Through a series of events orchestrated by God, King Xerxes ultimately reverses the decree, and Haman's evil plans are thwarted. Haman's downfall comes when he is exposed as the mastermind behind the plot against the Jews. King Xerxes, upon learning of Haman's treachery, orders his execution by hanging on the very gallows that Haman had prepared for Mordecai. This turn of events is seen as an example of divine justice and retribution, as Haman's own evil schemes lead to his downfall and demise. Number 9 is the Pharaoh of Egypt. Pharaoh is a prominent figure in the biblical account of Exodus, where he is depicted as the ruler of Egypt who enslaved the Israelites and stubbornly refused to free them, despite repeated warnings and miraculous displays of God's power through Moses and Aaron. His actions are marked by pride, stubbornness, and cruelty towards the Israelites, whom he considered a crucial asset to his kingdom's labor force. Throughout the Exodus narrative, Pharaoh continually defies God's command to release the Israelites, even as the severity of the plagues increases. These plagues, including the turning of water to blood, infestations of frogs, lice, and flies, livestock disease, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and the death of the firstborn, serve to demonstrate God's authority over Pharaoh and his kingdom. A critical turning point comes when Pharaoh's own decree to kill the firstborn sons of the Israelites brings about a mirrored judgment upon his own household. Despite this severe warning, Pharaoh persists in hardening his heart and refuses to let the Israelites go. It is only after the final and most devastating plague, the death of the firstborn, including Pharaoh's own son, that he relents and allows the Israelites to depart. Yet, even then, he changes his mind and pursues them with his army, only to be defeated when the Red Sea miraculously parts, allowing the Israelites to escape while the Egyptian army drowns. The final plague, known as the Plague of the Firstborn, was a direct judgment from God, highlighting the symmetry of divine retribution as Pharaoh's own cruel edict came back to haunt him. The tragic and catastrophic loss of the firstborn sons, including Pharaoh's own, finally compelled him to free the Israelites. This event underscores God's judgment and power, as well as his commitment to deliver his people. It is commemorated in the Jewish tradition of Passover, a significant and sacred observance that continues to this day. Number 10. Ananias and Sapphira. Ananias and Sapphira were a married couple mentioned in the New Testament book of Acts, known for their deceitful actions and their attempt to deceive the early Christian community. They sold a piece of property and brought only a portion of the proceeds to the apostles, claiming it was the full amount, while secretly keeping some for themselves. Their sin was not in keeping some of the money for themselves, but in lying about it and presenting their offering as if it were the full amount. This act of deception was seen as a challenge to the integrity and unity of the early Christian community. When confronted by the Apostle Peter, both Ananias and Sapphira continued with their lie, leading to a severe consequence. In Acts 5:1-11, it is recorded that both Ananias and Sapphira fell dead after Peter exposed their deception, with each of them struck down by the judgment of God. This incident served as a powerful demonstration of the severity of dishonesty and hypocrisy within the Christian community, and emphasized the importance of truthfulness and sincerity in relationships with God and others. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel. Thank you for watching and be blessed.